Okay, so get ready to dive into this wild world of AI,
Mm-hmm.
but not just like the ones and zeros we're
Right.
talking about, like the ideologies,
Right.
the ideologies that are fueling this race towards artificial general intelligence.
Yeah.
You've sent over some seriously thought-provoking pieces,
Mhm.
including an article from TruthDig about something called TESCREALism.
Mm-hmm. Seth
Seth Abramson's take on the motivations of some pretty big names in tech,
Yeah.
and even a research paper
Oh.
that digs into the potential consequences of all of this.
It's really fascinating how these articles, they kind of go beyond the technical, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
they delve into like the dreams and
Mm.
maybe even the delusions in some cases
Right.
of the people who are like really driving this whole thing towards AGI.
It's like we all know AI is a big deal.
Yeah.
But this TESCREAL thing, it's like, what even is that?
Right.
It sounds like something straight out of like, a sci-fi novel or something.
It's a mouthful too.
It is. It is. Yeah.
So like, what is it?
Yeah.
And why is it the key to understanding this whole AGI race?
So imagine like a Venn diagram
Okay.
of all these big future-focused ideas that are kind of floating around, like Silicon Valley these days, transhumanism, the singularity, you name it.
Right.
TESCREAL is like that overlapping center.
Okay.
The common thread in this whole tapestry of AGI ambitions,
Got it. Got it.
and it's an acronym, which is part of the problem, I think.
Yeah.
It stands for transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism.
It's a mouthful.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But each one kind of plays a role, and together they paint a picture of where I think some of the biggest names in tech seem to be headed, at least in their minds.
So it's not just about like building smarter machines. It's
Yeah.
about something like bigger, more
A
philosophical.
whole worldview.
Yeah.
It's like a whole worldview.
Before we unpack all those basicisms, though.
Yeah. One thing that really struck me was in that TruthDig article,
Okay.
they connect TESCREALism to eugenics,
Right.
which is, I mean, that's a pretty heavy accusation.
Yeah.
Are we saying that the people who are, building the future of intelligence are basically drawing inspiration from a movement
Right.
with a very, very dark past?
Yeah. And I think, the point isn't to like gaslight anybody or to make these direct comparisons to like the horrors of the past,
Yeah,
right?
of course, yeah.
But the article highlights this kind of shared theme between certain strands of, historical eugenics
Okay.
and some of the ideas within TESCREALism.
Okay.
And it's this idea that like humanity can be improved, quote unquote, through these selective means. In the past, it was, selective breeding.
Forced sterilization.
Exactly. And now it's about using technology
Right.
to enhance our capabilities, to potentially even transcend our current, human form. And so it's like,
So instead of forced sterilization or worse, we're talking about
right,
designer babies and brain chips.
potentially, yeah.
It's like trading one ethical minefield for another.
Precisely. And I think that's where the conversation needs to happen, right?
Right.
It's not about demonizing anyone, but it's about understanding
Right.
the historical context of some of these ideas.
For sure.
And then thinking about, okay, how might this manifest
Right.
in the age of AI?
Right. Because if we don't learn from the past,
Right.
we're doomed to repeat it, as they say.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this whole TESCREAL thing.
Okay.
We got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And the T, transhumanism, seems like as good a place as any.
Sure.
What's the gist there?
So transhumanism, in a nutshell, it's really all about using technology to kind of push the boundaries of what it means to be human.
Okay.
So think like enhanced intelligence, extended lifespans, maybe even like uploading our consciousness
Whoa.
into machines, right?
Yes.
The stuff of science fiction.
Right.
But it has very real world implications, or at least,
Yeah.
people are really working towards this.
Like Elon Musk's Neuralink, for example.
Exactly.
That's like straight out of like, a cyberpunk novel.
Right, exactly. Neuralink with its, brain-computer interfaces
Right.
is a prime example of this kind of transhumanist ambition.
Yeah.
Musk talks about merging human brains with AI to, like, keep up with the, the supposed threat of superintelligence.
Right.
But it also raises these questions of, like, what does it even mean to be human?
Right. And like, who gets to decide?
Exactly.
What enhancements are desirable? or even ethical, you know?
Right. Who's making these decisions?
Yeah, it's giving me some serious Gattaca vibes here.
Yeah, and that's a major critique
Yeah.
of the whole transhumanist vision, right? Is
Right.
that it could just end up exacerbating existing inequalities, creating a world where, the enhanced have even more advantages while
Yeah.
others are left behind.
Okay, so transhumanism is about like pushing the limits of human potential,
Yeah,
but with all this like ethical baggage that comes with it.
for sure. Yeah.
What about long-termism?
Long-termism, yeah.
It sounds like something out of like a philosophy seminar.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
It's basically this idea of prioritizing the well-being of future generations,
Okay.
even those in the very distant future, right?
Right.
Potentially at the expense of those alive today.
Wait, so you're saying it's okay to like
Right.
harm people living now if
Yeah.
it means a better future for people like thousands, millions of years from now?
That's the idea.
How do you even begin to calculate that?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And actually, the research paper that you sent
Yeah.
kind of dives into this with some pretty, mind-boggling examples.
Okay.
Like, it talks about how some long-termists believe it might be acceptable to, harm current generations if it meant, ensuring the existence of, trillions of digital people
Trillions.
in a simulated reality
What?
in a distant future.
Simulated reality.
Yeah,
This is getting very Matrix.
I know, right?
No.
But that's the thing about long-termism is it forces us to, confront some very uncomfortable possibilities.
Right.
Because if we're talking about, maximizing well-being over these vast timescales,
Yeah.
who gets to decide what that looks like?
Right. Exactly.
And who gets left out of the equation?
Okay, so we've covered transhumanism, upgrading humans,
Upgrading humans, yeah.
long-termism,
Yeah.
looking out for the future, even the really, really distant
It's
future.
a very, very far future.
What about effective altruism?
Oh,
Where does
right.
that fit into all of this?
So effective altruism, or EA,
Okay.
it's all about, using reason and evidence to figure out how to do the most good in the world.
Okay.
Which, on the surface, seems pretty straightforward, maybe even admirable, right?
Right. Who doesn't want to like make the world a better place?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling, there's more to it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have a feeling there's a but coming here.
There's always a but.
Right.
So EA often involves, using data and analysis
Mm-hmm.
to determine the absolute most effective way to do good, right? And this can lead to some interesting and sometimes controversial conclusions, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it's about, how do you maximize your impact, even if the methods seem, cold or calculating?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Didn't one of the source materials mention Sam Bankman-Fried,
Right.
the FTX guy?
The FTX guy, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was a self-proclaimed effective altruist.
Right. Okay.
And he basically justified amassing all this wealth through FTX
Mm.
by claiming that he could do more good,
Right.
donating huge sums later.
Right.
Obviously, things didn't
He didn't quite work out that.
didn't pan out.
Yeah.
So that was the thought process.
So EA can be used to kind of justify
Right.
some morally questionable actions.
Potentially.
If someone believes that the ends justify the means,
The ends justify the means.
it's a slippery slope.
Very much so. And it highlights the dangers
Yeah.
of, prioritizing these outcomes over the process.
Right.
Of focusing so much on, maximizing the good
Yeah.
that you kind of lose sight of the ethical implications.
Right. Of how you actually get there.
Exactly. Exactly. And, when you're talking about something as powerful as AGI,
Right.
that's a terrifying prospect
Yeah.
to get it wrong.
This is already making me rethink everything I thought I knew about AI.
Mm.
It's not just about the
Mhm.
algorithms and the processing power and all that.
Yeah.
It's about ideologies and worldviews that could potentially shape the future
Yeah.
in some really, really profound ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much so.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big one. And it gets even more complex or more, I don't know,
Okay.
interesting, I guess, when you consider that we're not just talking about a few fringe thinkers here. You know,
Right.
as we've been saying, some of the biggest names in tech, the ones pouring,
Right.
billions of dollars into AI research,
Yeah.
seem to be heavily influenced by these TESCREAL ideas.
Which brings us to the heart of this whole deep dive, right? How is this, how is TESCREALism actually showing up in the race toward AGI?
Yeah.
Is it just like a shared philosophy, or is there something like more concrete happening?
I think it's kind of a bit of both, to be honest.
Okay.
On the one hand, a lot of TESCREALists, they see AGI as a tool,
Okay.
a means to an end.
Okay.
They're not just interested in, like, building a smarter machine.
Right.
They're looking to, like, fundamentally transform what it even means
Right.
to be human, to achieve this kind of, like, utopian future. You know what I mean?
Okay, but how do these like abstract ideologies actually translate into like action?
Yeah.
Give me an example.
So take, for example, someone like Ben Goertzel.
Okay.
He's kind of a leading figure in the AGI world.
Okay.
And a self-proclaimed, transhumanist and cosmist.
Mm-hmm.
And he lays out this, like, whole vision
Yeah.
in his Cosmos Manifesto
Okay.
of humans, like, merging with technology, achieving this kind of, like, techno-godhood through
I read
AGI.
Techno-godhood. Okay, now they're just making up words.
Right.
But seriously, it sounds like for some people,
Yeah.
AGI isn't just about like,
Right.
making our lives easier or automating tasks. It's about like
Exactly.
transcending our limitations and achieving like a higher state of being.
Yeah, like unlocking our true potential,
Yeah.
which who knows what that even means, but yeah.
And it's not just like philosophical musing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
These ideas have teeth, especially when you consider
Yeah.
the vast resources being poured into AGI development
Sure.
by people like Elon Musk, Sam Altman, even the late Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah, big names, big money.
We've talked about Musk and his Neuralink project.
Right.
What about Altman and Bankman-Fried?
Okay.
How do they fit into this whole TESCREAL puzzle?
So Altman, he co-founded OpenAI,
Okay.
which is like, one of the leading AI research labs
Mm-hmm. For sure.
in the world right now. And
Yeah.
their mission statement, it talks about, like, ensuring that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity, right? Which sounds
nice.
very aligned with a lot of these utopian ideals
Yeah.
that we've been discussing.
Right, but then you have someone like Bankman-Fried who,
Right.
justified amassing this, fortune, basically,
Yep. Through FTX.
through FTX
Wow.
by claiming that,
Yeah,
he could do more good by giving it away later.
right, eventually.
That's the effective altruism at play.
Right, exactly.
But it seems like a dangerous game to play,
Can be, yeah.
especially when you're talking about technology as powerful as AGI.
And that's precisely the concern
Yeah.
that the research paper kind of raises, right?
Right.
Is that this pursuit of AGI, if it's fueled by this TESCREAList worldview,
Yeah.
could actually end up exacerbating existing inequalities
Oh, right.
rather than solving them.
That makes sense, because if you're so focused on,
Right.
creating this superior post-human future.
Right, yeah.
It's easy to overlook the needs and concerns of
Right.
those who don't fit into that vision.
Of the humans that are here, like right now.
It's like they're so busy looking at the stars that they forget about,
Exactly.
people struggling here on Earth.
The people who are actually, like, building their spaceships for them, potentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the paper actually gives, like, some
Yeah.
pretty concrete examples of how this is already happening.
Oh.
Like, for example, there's been a lot of attention recently on the exploitation of workers in developing countries who are, like, hired to label data
Right.
to train these AI systems, and they're, being exposed to often, like, horrific content.
It's like the dark underbelly
Right.
of the AI boom.
Yes, exactly.
While these, Silicon Valley tech elites are, off talking about this utopian future.
Right.
There are real people being exploited right now
Exactly.
to make that vision a reality.
Yeah, their version of reality.
It's a classic example of how technology, even something like AGI, with all its potential,
Right.
it's never neutral, right? It's always shaped by the values
Always.
and the priorities of the people creating it.
Of the people who are building it, funding it,
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is why it's so important to have these conversations,
100%.
to kind of pull back the curtain
Yeah.
and really examine
Yeah.
the ideologies that are driving this technology.
That's
Because
okay.
if we don't,
Yeah.
we risk, sleepwalking into a future that only benefits a select few. Totally.
So what are the alternatives?
Right.
If AGI is being driven by these potentially,
Yeah.
problematic ideologies, is there another way to kind of approach AI development that doesn't
Right. How do we
fall into these traps?
First, correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the million-dollar question that, a lot of researchers and ethicists are grappling with these days.
Yeah.
And the research paper you sent actually offers some, like, interesting alternatives,
Yeah.
instead of trying to create this like all-powerful AGI that can like,
Right.
supposedly solve every problem.
Right.
Some experts are suggesting that maybe we should be focusing on developing AI solutions for like specific, well-defined problems.
So instead of creating like, a master algorithm to rule them all,
Right, right. Yeah.
we should be focused on building targeted AI tools for things like,
Right, like very,
improving healthcare, tackling climate change,
very specific.
making education more accessible. Like,
Exactly, yeah. Very targeted.
okay.
Because that way you can kind of build in
Right.
more
Ethical, yeah, exactly.
guidelines and,
Safety protocols, all of that, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's a more grounded approach, right? One that prioritizes human needs and values
Right.
over these, like, grand visions of,
Yeah.
techno-utopian futures.
It sounds less exciting than like, colonizing Mars or uploading our minds into computers.
Right. It's not as sexy.
But maybe a little less exciting is exactly what we need right now.
Exactly. I think that's a good point. It's like, yeah, let's maybe pump the brakes a little bit on the
hype.
utopian visions. Yeah.
It seems like it all comes down to this.
Okay.
Do we want a future that's shaped by like
Yeah.
hype and grand promises,
Mm-hmm.
or one that's built on like a foundation of ethics,
Right.
responsibility,
Yeah.
and a realistic understanding
Yes.
of the challenges ahead? I think that's a great place to kind
Sure.
of leave that question.
So we've talked a lot about TESCREALism, this cluster of ideologies like transhumanism and long-termism.
Right, right.
And we've seen how it's kind of like the driving force behind a lot of this,
Yeah.
AGI development, but especially this whole idea that we need to be building this
Yeah.
all-powerful AGI that can like solve all of humanity's problems.
Right, which comes with a whole host of other questions, right? Like
Exists.
ethical questions, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, and it's not just like a hypothetical future, right?
Exactly. And that's what's so, I think, crucial to remember about all of this is that, like,
Yeah.
we're already seeing the effects.
Right. We're seeing the red flags now.
Yeah, like right now in real time.
Right.
The research paper, it highlights, like you were saying, that
Yeah.
exploitation of workers.
Yeah. In the global south, it's awful.
Yeah, exactly. Who are like, tasked with doing this really
It's essentially like digital piecework.
yeah, and it's often like,
Yeah.
really disturbing content too.
Yeah, they're labeling data to train AI,
Exactly.
and they're exposed to some really, really horrific stuff.
Yeah, and for like,
And paid terribly.
pennies, basically.
Yeah, to basically provide the fuel for all of this AI development.
It's like you said, it's the dark side
It's the dark side of the AI boom.
of the AI boom, where you have, these Silicon Valley CEOs.
Talking about
Yeah, like flying cars and
utopia.
utopia and all this. But meanwhile, the actual reality on the ground
is exploitation.
is a very different story.
It's like this perfect example of how technology
Right.
can be used to just reinforce these
Never neutral.
existing power structures.
Never neutral.
Even when it's like,
Right. Even when it's dressed up
cloaked in this language of progress.
in the language of progress. Exactly. It's like, we're going to use this to like, solve inequality. It's like, well,
Yeah, it's actually making it worse.
how is this actually playing out in the real world?
And that's why, like, I think that research paper
Yeah, I think they make a good point about,
made such a good point about, like, we need to pump the brakes a little bit
yeah, let's slow down.
on this whole AGI thing.
Maybe AGI isn't the answer.
Maybe it's not.
Maybe like focusing on more
Maybe focusing on specific problems.
specific, like smaller,
Yeah, like using AI to solve
right, very clearly defined
climate change.
problems. Yeah.
Or, make healthcare more effective.
Like where you can actually measure
So instead of this, like pie in the sky.
right, and control
Full.
AG. Yeah, that's going to save the world.
Exactly. Because when you're talking about something as, like, nebulous as AGI,
Right.
it's very easy to kind of, like,
Hide behind
hand wave away
the exploitation.
and
Like,
say, well, it'll all be better when the AGI comes.
right, exactly. It's like we have to, the ends justify the means. And it's like,
Right.
hold on a second.
Yeah, and the paper actually, it suggests that, focusing on these more
targeted.
Yeah, these targeted AI solutions.
Yeah, more humble,
That
maybe.
may actually allow us to
Is you can actually build in
those safety
the
protocols.
ethical guidelines.
Because you can actually define, like, okay.
Exactly. It's not this, like, amorphous blob of intelligence that, we're just hoping
It's going to be nice, yeah.
is going to be benevolent.
Right, right.
Yeah, so you can actually, like, think about, okay.
And you can measure whether it's working?
Right. How do we...
Because you have, like, a specific goal?
Measure the impact, exactly. So
I have to say, this whole deep dive into TESCREALism and its influence on AI.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's been a wild ride.
It's a rabbit hole for sure, yeah.
It is. It's a rabbit hole, but it's so important because, like, it's made me realize that, like...
100%. And I think the thing that I keep coming back to is, like, the future of AI. It's not, like, preordained.
Right. And I think for a lot of people, it feels like it is.
Right. It feels very like, oh, it's this big inevitable force.
Yeah, the robots are coming and, like, what are we going to do about it?
Right. It's like, no, like, we're making decisions
right now
every day
that are shaping
this this future. So
it's not just about, like, what kind of AGI we're building. It's about, like,
about the value that we're
encoding
into these systems. Yeah, and I think that's the takeaway is, like, we have more agency than we think, and we have a choice to make. We have a choice, yeah.
Wow. That's a great place to wrap this one up.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a lot to think about, and
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely given me a lot to consider as we move forward. So thank you for coming on this journey with me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.